Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9 and now on to a special interaction at the TV9 What India Thinks Today Summit. Well, is ethanol blending the answer to India's rising fuel shocks, and can new technology solve the fuel versus food debate? Of course, from lessons in Brazil's flex fuel shift to a key question, should petrol actually get cheaper with ethanol blending? Well, earlier I spoke to Praveen Parapati, chairman of Swacch Bio Solutions, on the sidelines of the TV9 network What India Thinks Today Summit, and began by asking him how Swacch Bio's new technology can solve for India's ethanol conundrum. Take a listen in.
Yeah, basically the technology we are using is to take agricultural residue, that is not the crops, but whatever is left over after the crops, and then you break that down into producing sugars and then producing ethanol from there. It's a harder problem to solve, and many have been working at it, and I think there are some initial implementations that at Panipat, and BPCL is doing one at Odisha. But we think we have a better solution in place, and it will work on rice straw, or it will work on corn stalk, it will work on sugarcane bagasse, and it will also work on some energy crops that can be grown to a much larger extent.
All right, and talk to us about the fuel versus food debate. And I think forever the conversation has been around the fact that if you prioritize the fuel-based production at a farm level, then perhaps food scarcity could be another problem that hits us. But in your technology, that problem already seems to be solved, isn't it?
It's largely solved in the sense, if we use the remaining material, you can meet about 50 to 60% of the petroleum needs of the country. If we actually do something, you replace some part of the food, but right now we have about 25% excess rice being produced. Okay? And rice cultivation is very intense. Needs a lot of water, needs a lot of inputs and things like that. And state governments or the central government is buying that, and then it sits in the godown, gets damaged. Okay? So if we convert 5% or 10% of that land to grow energy crop, okay, then suddenly you have enough biomass to replace all the diesel, all the petroleum, and produce all the SAF you need. So essentially you can become completely self-sufficient.
All right, and given all that we are seeing in West Asia, given the predictions being made about oil prices rising, the potential scarcity of petroleum products for the world, not just for India, do you think there is a reason for the government now to sort of rebalance its priorities and really ensure that flex fuel becomes mainstay for India's automotive industry?
Absolutely. I'm hopeful that this incentivizes everybody. I think both India and other countries will start looking at their resources and saying, how can we be more self-sufficient, self-reliant? What we have seen initially with COVID and now with this war is supply chains are a little bit more brittle than we thought. And so building this capability, and especially if it's an import and you're importing 150 billion to 200 billion every year, and can actually change it so more of it can stay in the country, will make a huge change, and I hope they're paying attention.
Talk to us about how do we incentivize flex fuels for consumers. For the OEMs, of course, there is going to be a cost advantage because the input cost is now coming cheaper with the flex fuels built in, ethanol built in. But for the consumers, is there need for the government to incentivize flex fuels? Because the E20 is going to pretty much cost the same as a regular liter of petrol. So with E20 and potentially higher variants of ethanol being blended, is there a reason for the government and a case for the government to incentivize the end consumers with cheaper petrol pump prices?
I think as long as there's a distinction in the price between the ethanol blend ones and just pure hydrocarbons, the consumer will gravitate towards the ones that are less costly. How the government does it, I'll leave that one to their imagination. But you can either increase the cost, or you can give the tax subsidy, or do something else in between. Okay, but I think it is a good way to try to incentivize more of the customers to do the right thing. And so basically, the less they use of pure gasoline, the less they are polluting, and the better off everybody is. The globe is better, the country is better. Delhi, you can literally feel it every time. So using higher blends and starting to think about using some types of blends even in diesel will make a huge difference.
But altruism aside, sir, caring for the environment and doing the green pivot aside, there are also concerns about whether the engines are tuned up to accommodate the flex fuel. And is there going to be a loss of power? Is there going to be more maintenance required for engines? And will certain engines, especially the Bharat 4, Bharat 5 engines, will they be able to take this ethanol mix? Are those concerns of consumers valid?
Not to any significant extent. We see E85 vehicles in US all the time, okay, and they're running fairly well. And in Brazil, you see even ability at a gas station for the consumer to just dial what level of mixing they want, okay, and they're all working fine. India, I don't believe, is so much behind in terms of building these vehicles, okay. From what I remember, I think in about 2010, 2011, 2012 time frame, India had announced growing to 10% or greater. So if you started making vehicles that are capable of handling 10% and greater, by now most of the things are addressed. The change to flex fuel is a minor change, as long as at least those changes that have been announced since 2012 have been taken care of.
All right, let's leave it at that. Mr. Praveen Parapati, a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for your time, sir.